The great hall of the Galactic Assembly was older than human civilization itself. Its walls stretched up toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars, and thousands of alien delegates filled the curved seats that rose like waves around a central platform. Light from a dozen different suns poured through crystal windows, painting everything in colors that human eyes could barely understand. Captain Tae-jun stood at the edge of the platform with his hands clasped behind his back. His uniform was simple and dark, nothing like the flowing robes and glittering armor worn by the aliens around him. Beside him stood Ambassador Hana Cho, her face calm and pleasant despite the whispers that filled the hall. Behind them, Dr. Yuna Park held a data tablet close to her chest, and Lieutenant Min-ho Kong watched the crowd with quiet, careful eyes. They were the first humans to stand in this ancient place, and everyone was staring at them. "Look at them," a Valoran delegate said loudly, not bothering to hide his words. The Valorans were tall and thin, with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed faint blue. They had ruled the assembly for 3,000 years, and they made sure everyone remembered it. So small, so soft. I'm surprised they survived long enough to reach the stars. Laughter rippled through the hall. Other species joined in, their strange voices mixing together in mockery. The Kreeth clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Darvani rumbled deep in their massive chests. Even the usually quiet Sylphi let out musical sounds that clearly meant the same thing. Tae-jun did not move. His expression did not change. He simply stood there, watching and listening, as if he were studying something interesting. Ambassador Hana Cho stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "We thank the Galactic Assembly for allowing humanity to speak today," she said. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying across the vast hall. "We come with open hands and peaceful hearts. We wish only to learn from your great civilizations and to offer what friendship we can." The High Marshal of the Valorans, an ancient being named Dreth, leaned forward on his floating throne. His silver face showed nothing but boredom. "Friendship," he repeated, as if tasting something unpleasant. "What could your species possibly offer us? Your ships are slow. Your weapons are primitive. Your bodies break easily, and your lives are over in the blink of an eye. You are children playing at the edge of an ocean you cannot understand." More laughter. More whispers. Yuna Park's fingers tightened on her tablet, but she said nothing. Min-ho Kong's jaw tensed for just a moment before relaxing again. Hana Cho smiled gently. "Perhaps you are right, High Marshal. We are young. We have much to learn. That is why we are here." Dreth waved one long hand dismissively. "You will be given probationary status. Class D civilization. You may observe and trade in limited zones. Do not expect more. Do not ask for more. You are guests in our galaxy, humans. Remember your place." The session continued for hours after that. Humanity was assigned a small region of space, far from anything important. They were given trading rights that meant almost nothing. They were told the rules they must follow, the spaces they could not enter, the technologies they could not access. Through it all, Tae-jun remained still and silent. He watched the alien delegates. He studied how they spoke to each other, how they formed alliances, how they showed power and weakness. He noticed which species feared the Valorans and which ones simply pretended to respect them. He saw the cracks in the assembly that no one else seemed to notice. When the session finally ended, the human delegation was escorted back to their ship. The Horizon's Edge. It was a small vessel compared to the massive cruisers of other species, boxy and simple in design. The aliens who saw it shook their heads in pity. Inside the ship, the atmosphere changed completely. "That was difficult," Hana Cho said, finally letting her shoulders drop. "They enjoyed every moment of that." "They did," Tae-jun agreed. He moved to the main console and began pulling up data. But they also showed us everything we needed to see. Una Park was already working at her station, her fingers flying across screens. I have been scanning their networks since we arrived. Their security is impressive, but not as good as they think. I found something interesting. The others gathered around her. The Craft Dominion, Una said, pulling up star maps and reports. They are an empire outside the Assembly's borders. The Assembly has been ignoring them for centuries, treating them as a minor threat. But look at this. The data painted a terrifying picture. The Craft had conquered over 200 species in the past 1,000 years. Their fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. They were brutal, efficient, and expanding faster every decade. The Assembly does not take them seriously, Una continued. They believe their combined forces are too strong to challenge. They are wrong. Minho Kang studied the tactical data with sharp eyes. The Krath fight differently than the Assembly expects. They do not follow the old rules. They hit fast, they hit hard, and they do not stop until everything is broken. Tae-Jun nodded slowly. The Assembly is arrogant. They have been powerful for so long that they have forgotten what real danger looks like. He turned to face his crew. Earth Command suspected this. That is why we are really here. Hanacho raised an eyebrow. To watch the galaxy burn? To understand it first, Tae-Jun said, and to be ready when the time comes. Far away, in the cold darkness between stars, something was moving. A fleet of black ships, larger than anything the Assembly had ever faced, gathered in the shadows. The Craft Dominion had been patient for a very long time. They had watched the Assembly grow fat and lazy. They had studied their defenses and found them wanting. Soon they would strike, and when they did, the galaxy would learn a terrible truth. The Valorans and their allies were not the predators they believed themselves to be. They were prey that had simply never met a real hunter, but there was another truth waiting to be discovered. A truth that even the Krath could not imagine. On that small, simple ship called the Horizon's Edge, 4 humans sat quietly and planned. They were not victims. They were not children. They were something else entirely. And the galaxy was not ready for what was coming. The first attack came without warning. 2 border worlds belonging to the Assembly vanished in a single night. Not conquered. Not occupied. Vanished. The Krath burned everything to ash and moved on before anyone could. Respond.panic spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. In the great hall of the Assembly. There was no more laughter. No more casual mockery. The alien delegates screamed at each other, blaming and accusing. The Valorans demanded action. The Kreeth wanted to hide. The Darvani called for immediate war. Nobody agreed on anything, except that they were all afraid. High Marshal Dreth slammed his staff against the floor, silencing the chaos. His silver face was tight with anger that could not quite hide his fear. Enough. We will combine our fleets. Every member species will contribute. We will crush these Krath invaders and remind the galaxy why the Assembly rules. He turned his glowing eyes toward the human delegation, standing quietly in the back of the hall. That includes you, humans. Send whatever ships you have. Every hand is needed, even the weakest ones. Ambassador Hanacho bowed her head. We will do our part, High Marshal. 2 weeks later, the human fleet arrived at the gathering point. 12 ships in total. Small, boxy, unremarkable. They looked like cargo vessels that had been fitted with weapons as an afterthought. Around them floated the assembled might of the Galactic Assembly, 3,000 warships of every size and design. Bristling with weapons and shining with advanced technology. Alien commanders looked at the human vessels and shook their heads. Metal coffins, one Valoran captain said over an open channel, not caring who heard. They will be the first to die. Perhaps that is for the best. They will distract the enemy while real warriors do the work. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Lieutenant Minho Kong listened to the insults with a calm face. His hands moved steadily over his console, pulling up data on craft battle tactics and fleet movements. "They are louder than they are smart," he said quietly. "Look at their formation. They expect the craft to fight like assembly forces do. Straight lines, formal engagements, trading fire until one side retreats." He shook his head. "The craft will not do that." Captain Tae-jun stood behind him, studying the same data. "What do you see?" "The craft hit from multiple angles at once. They break formations and create chaos. They target command ships first and communication relays. Once an enemy fleet cannot coordinate, they pick it apart piece by piece." Minho looked up at his captain. "The assembly is not ready for this kind of warfare." "No," Tae-jun agreed. "They are not." Dr. Yuna Park looked up from her station. "Captain, I have received a coded message from Earth Command." Tae-jun moved to her side. The message was brief, but its meaning was clear. "Observe. Analyze. Do not reveal capabilities." Hanacho read the words over his shoulder. "They want us to hold back." "To watch." "Yes," Tae-jun said. "For now." The battle came 3 days later. The craft fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm of black metal and burning light. 5,000 ships, each one designed for one purpose: destruction. The assembly fleet moved to engage with confidence that lasted exactly 12 minutes. The first wave of craft ships smashed through the assembly's careful formations like a hammer through glass. They did not fight fair. They rammed smaller vessels. They launched weapons that burned through shields and hulls alike. They moved with perfect coordination, as if guided by a single terrible mind. Alien commanders screamed orders that nobody could follow. Communication channels filled with static and panic. Ships crashed into each other, trying to retreat. The darkness of space lit up with explosions, each one marking the death of hundreds or thousands of beings. The human fleet hung back at the edge of the battle. To the aliens watching, it looked like cowardice. The small human ships seemed to be running away while real warriors died. But on the horizon's edge, nobody was running. Minho Kong's eyes moved constantly, tracking every movement of the craft forces. "There," he said, pointing at his screen. "Their command ships stay behind the main line. They relay orders through a chain of smaller vessels. Destroy those relays, and their coordination breaks." Yuna Park recorded everything: battle data, ship signatures, weapon frequencies. Every piece of information was captured and stored for analysis. Tae-jun watched the slaughter with a face made of stone. It was hard to stand by while so many died. But he had his orders. And more importantly, he understood why those orders existed. This was a test, not of weapons or shields, but of something more important. Earth needed to know what the galaxy truly was, what it was capable of, what it would become when faced with real fear. Now they knew. When the battle finally ended, over 800 assembly ships had been destroyed. The craft had lost less than 50. The remaining assembly forces limped back to the gathering point. Broken and confused. High Marshal Dreth's voice crackled across every channel, demanding explanations and assigning blame. When he reached the human fleet, his words turned venomous. "Cowards! You hid while our warriors died. What use are you?" Hanacho responded calmly. "Our ships are not designed for direct assault, High Marshal. We contributed what we could. You contributed nothing. Worthless, pathetic creatures." The channel closed. Around the human fleet, alien vessels turned away in disgust. Nobody wanted to be near the cowards. That night, Tae-jun sat alone in his quarters, staring at a star map. The Krath were advancing faster than anyone expected. At this rate, they would reach the assembly's core worlds within months. Millions of beings would die. Perhaps billions. He opened a secure channel to Earth. The message he sent was simple. Request permission to proceed with protocol. Omega. The response came faster than expected. Just 3 words that changed everything. Permission granted. Proceed. Tae-Jun closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, something had shifted. The patient observer was gone. Something harder had taken his place. He called his crew to the bridge. The waiting is over, he said. It is time to show them what we really are. The Assembly's capital station, Nexus Prime, was a world unto itself. Millions of beings lived and worked within its spinning rings, surrounded by the greatest collection of technology and culture in the galaxy. It had stood for 8,000 years as a symbol of civilization's triumph over the darkness of space. Now it trembled with fear. Refugee ships arrived every hour, carrying survivors from destroyed worlds. The docking bays overflowed with the desperate and the wounded. In the corridors, species that had never spoken to each other huddled together, united by terror. The Krath were coming. Everyone knew it, and nobody knew how to stop them. Captain Tae-Jun walked through these corridors with purpose in his steps. His crew followed close behind. They were no longer the quiet observers from before. Something had changed in the way they carried themselves. Something that made the aliens around them look twice. He stopped at a massive door, marked with Valoran symbols of authority. 2 guards blocked his path, their weapons raised. No humans beyond this point, one guard said flatly. Return to your ship. Tae-Jun looked at the guard with calm, dark eyes. Tell High Marshal Dreth that the human captain requests an audience. Tell him it concerns the survival of the assembly. The guard laughed. The survival of... You think the High Marshal has time for your pathetic games? Go away before I... Tell him, Tae-Jun repeated, and something in his voice made the guard stop. It was not loud or threatening. It was simply certain. Absolutely, completely certain. The guard hesitated, then pressed a communication device on his wrist. A moment later, the door opened. High Marshal Dreth sat on his floating throne in the center of a vast war room. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing the advancing Krath fleet and the shrinking territory of the assembly. His silver face was lined with exhaustion and barely contained despair. The human, he said, not looking up. Come to gloat? Or perhaps to beg for mercy when the Krath arrive? Tae-Jun walked forward until he stood directly before the throne. Neither. I have come to offer you a chance. Dreth finally looked at him. A chance? What chance could humans possibly offer? Your ships are toys. Your soldiers are soft. You are nothing but... We have been hiding, Tae-Jun said simply. The words hung in the air. Dreth stared at him, his glowing eyes narrowing. Hiding? What do you mean? Tae-Jun clasped his hands behind his back. 50 years ago, humanity detected signals from space that proved we were not alone. We were excited at first. Then we were afraid. And then we were practical. He paused, letting the words sink in. We did not know what waited for us among the stars. So we prepared for the worst. Dreth leaned forward slowly. Prepared how? Every technological advancement humanity has made in the past 5 decades has been concealed. The ships you have seen are not our real fleet. The weapons you have scanned are not our true weapons. The soldiers you have met are not our actual warriors. The war room had gone silent. Other Valoran officers stood frozen, listening with growing disbelief. You are lying, Dreth said. Your kind cannot hide such things. We scanned your planet. We observed your civilization. We saw... You saw what we wanted you to see, Tae-Jun interrupted. Our real shipyards are hidden beneath the surfaces of moons. Our true fleet numbers over 15,000 warships, each one carrying weapons your technology cannot understand. Our soldiers have been enhanced since birth, trained for combat from the moment they could walk. He stepped closer to the throne, and for the first time, Dreth leaned back. For 50 years, we have studied every species in this galaxy. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, your secrets. We learned your languages, your histories, your military tactics. We prepared not just for war, but for understanding. Because power without wisdom is just destruction. Dreth's voice came out as a whisper. Why? Why hide all of this? Because we needed to know if you were worth saving, Taejun said. When we arrived, you mocked us. You insulted us. You treated us like insects beneath your feet. And we accepted it. We wanted to see what kind of beings you truly were. He turned and looked at the holographic displays showing the approaching craft fleet. Now we know. You are arrogant. You are divided. You have grown weak from too many centuries of peace. But you are not evil. You do not deserve what the Krath will do to you. Dreth stared at the human before him. For the first time in his ancient life, he felt something he had never experienced when looking at another species. Fear, not fear of violence or death. Fear of something unknown. Something that looked small and soft and weak, but had eyes that held depths he could not measure. What do you want from us? Dreth asked. Nothing, Taejun said. We do not need your permission. We do not need your help. I am here only to tell you what is about to happen, so that you do not interfere. Alarms suddenly screamed throughout the station. Red lights flashed. Officers rushed to their consoles, shouting in panic. High Marshal. One cried out. The Krath. Their main fleet has arrived. 10,000 ships, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Dreth's face went pale beneath his silver skin. 10,000. More than 3 times the Assembly's remaining forces. It was over. It was all over. But Taejun simply smiled. A small, cold, terrifying smile. Right on time, he said. Now watch, High Marshal. Watch and remember this moment. He pressed a device on his wrist and spoke a single word. Begin. On the sensors, behind the massive Krath armada, space itself began to tear open. Points of light appeared, growing larger and larger, until they became gateways to somewhere else. And from those gateways, ships emerged. Human ships. Thousands of them. Ships that were nothing like the small, boxy vessels the galaxy had seen before. These were massive. These were terrible. These were beautiful in the way that a storm or a predator is beautiful. The bridge fell silent. Dreth stared at the screens, his ancient mind struggling to process what he was seeing. What ... He breathed. What are you? Taejun turned to face him, and the smile faded into something harder. We are humanity, he said. And the lesson is about to begin. 8,000 human warships emerged from the dimensional gates in perfect formation. They moved as one, like a single creature with thousands of bodies, spreading across the void with terrible grace. Each ship was massive, covered in armor that seemed to drink in the light, bristling with weapons that glowed with power the galaxy had never seen. At the center of the formation flew the flagship, Terra's Wrath. It was larger than some space stations, a mountain of metal and fury, shaped by human hands for one purpose. And on its bridge stood Fleet Admiral Seok Hyan, a man whose name had been kept secret from every alien record for decades. He was old, but not weak. His hair was gray, his face lined with years of hard decisions. But his eyes were sharp and cold, the eyes of a predator that had been waiting patiently for its prey. "All ships," he said calmly. "Engage." The battle that followed would be remembered across the galaxy for 10,000 years. Human ships did not fight like assembly vessels. They did not form neat lines or follow ancient rules of engagement. They swept through the Krath fleet like wolves through sheep, striking from angles that seemed impossible, appearing and disappearing in flashes of light that bent space itself, weapons fired that the Krath could not comprehend, beams that twisted gravity, crushing ships into balls of metal, missiles that phased through shields and detonated inside hulls, energy pulses that shut down entire systems with a touch, leaving Krath vessels dead and drifting. The Krath tried to adapt. They had conquered 200 species. They had faced every tactic and weapon the galaxy had to offer. But they had never faced anything like this. A Krath commander screamed orders at his fleet, trying to reorganize against the human assault. Before he could finish speaking, 3 human fighters streaked past his command bridge, so close he could see the pilots through their cockpits. They were moving at speeds that should have killed any living creature. But the humans inside were calm, focused, their enhanced bodies handling forces that would crush normal beings. One fighter released a small device that attached to the Krath ship's hull. 3 seconds later, the entire vessel went dark. Dead in space on Nexus Prime, every screen showed the battle. Every being watched in stunned silence. The Valorans, the Kreeth, the Davani, the Sylphi, all of them stared as the species they had mocked tore through the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. Dr. Yuna Park worked furiously at her console aboard the Horizon's Edge, which now sat at the heart of the human formation. Her fingers flew across screens as she broke through Krath, communication encryption, and seized control of their broadcast network. "I have access," she announced. "Broadcasting now." Every Krath ship received the same feed. Every Krath world, every Krath colony, every corner of their dominion. They all saw the same thing, their greatest fleet being destroyed by creatures they had dismissed as weak and primitive. And behind the images, a sound, a rhythm, the beating of drums, ancient and primal, mixed with voices raised in wordless war cries. It was the sound of humanity's oldest instincts, the part of them that had survived ice ages and wars and plagues, the part that never gave up, never surrendered, never stopped fighting. Captain Tae-Jun led a boarding team to the Krath command ship. Their assault shuttle punched through the weakened hull like a spear, and human soldiers poured out into the dark corridors within. The Krath warriors were massive, twice the size of humans, with armored skin and claws that could tear metal. They had never lost a close-quarters battle in all their history. That history ended in the next 15 minutes. The human soldiers moved with terrifying efficiency. They had been trained since childhood, enhanced with genetic modifications and technological implants. They were faster than they should be, stronger than they looked, and absolutely without mercy. Lieutenant Minho Kong fought at the front, his weapon firing in precise bursts as he advanced through the chaos. A Krath warrior charged at him, massive claws swinging. Minho ducked under the blow, planted his weapon against the creature's chest, and fired once. The warrior fell. He did not slow down. None of them did. The Krath Command Center fell within 20 minutes. The supreme commander of the invasion force, a towering figure covered in battle scars, stood surrounded by human soldiers. His forces destroyed, his fleet burning in space around him. Tae-Jun stepped forward, removing his helmet. He looked up at the massive alien with an expression that held no hatred, no triumph, only cold certainty. "Your invasion is over," he said simply. The Supreme Commander stared at him. In his long life, he had never tasted defeat. He had crushed civilizations, burned worlds, built an empire on the bones of the weak. And now he stood before a creature half his size, knowing that everything he had built was ending. "What are you?" he asked, his voice rough with something that might have been fear. Tae-Jun considered the question. "We are what you made us," he said. "The galaxy looked at us and saw prey, so we became predators. You saw weakness, so we hid our strength. You saw victims, so we became something else entirely." He turned and walked toward the viewport, looking out at the burning remains of the Krath fleet. "We are humanity. We are the children of a small blue world that has faced extinction 100 times and survived every single one. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. But we do not forgive those who threaten what we love." On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Hana Cho stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Assembly. The screens behind her showed the final moments of the battle, the last Krath ships surrendering, the human fleet standing victorious among the wreckage. "We came to you in peace," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We asked only for friendship. You gave us mockery. You called us weak. You treated us as insects beneath your notice." She paused, letting the words settle. "And we accepted it, because we wanted to give you a chance. We wanted to believe you were better than your arrogance suggested." She gestured at the screens. "The Krath gave us war. They came to burn your worlds and enslave your people. And while you argued and panicked and blamed each other, we stopped them." Her eyes swept across the hall, meeting the gazes of delegates from 100 different species. "This is what humanity is. We smile and offer our hand in friendship. We endure insults and mockery without complaint. We ask for nothing but the chance to live in peace." Her voice hardened. "But when something threatens those we care about, we become something else. Something that the Krath discovered too late. Something that you would be wise to remember." She straightened her shoulders and spoke her final words with quiet power. "We are not your enemies. We never were. But make no mistake, we are no one's prey." The hall was silent, and across the galaxy, watching on screens and broadcasts, billions of beings stared at humanity with new eyes. The small, soft, weak creatures had torn the greatest threat in history to pieces. The universe had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Nexus Prime. The galaxy was still learning to breathe again. The Krath Dominion had surrendered completely. Their supreme commander had signed the terms aboard the Terra's Wrath, kneeling before Admiral Siok Hyon, while the surviving Krath fleet drifted powerless around them. Human forces now occupied former Krath territory, not as conquerors who burned and enslaved, but as peacekeepers who rebuilt and protected. This distinction terrified the other species more than open conquest ever could. Conquerors could be understood. Conquerors made sense. But these humans helped their defeated enemies. They fed the hungry. They healed the wounded. They asked for nothing in return. Not what kind of beings did that? On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Assembly gathered for a ceremony that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. The Great Hall was filled once more, but the atmosphere had changed completely. No more mockery. No more whispers of disdain. When the human delegation entered, delegates rose to their feet in respect. Admiral Tae-Jun, no longer captain, promoted by Earth Command for his role in the war, walked at the front of the group. His face was calm and somewhat unfurlable with the attention. Behind him came Yuna Park, Minho Kong, and Hana Cho, all of them dressed in simple human formal wear that somehow seemed more impressive than the finest alien robes. High Marshal Dreth stepped forward from his floating throne. The ancient Valoran moved slowly, as if the weight of recent events had aged him even more. He stopped before Tae-Jun and bowed his silver head, something no Valoran had ever done to another species. "On behalf of the Galactic Assembly," Dreth said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, I formally request that humanity be elevated to Alpha tier status. Full membership. Full rights. A seat on the High Council. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alpha tier. The highest rank any species could hold. Equal to the Valorans themselves. Ambassador Hanacho stepped forward to accept, but it was Tae-Jun who spoke first. We accept, he said, but we want something understood. We did not fight for power. We did not fight for status. We fought because it was the right thing to do. We ask only that the Assembly remember this. Strength is not measured by how many you can crush beneath your feet. It is measured by how many you can lift up. Dreth nodded slowly. We are beginning to understand that now. Later, in a quiet room away from the ceremony, Dreth met privately with Hanacho. The High Marshal looked tired, but also curious. Like someone who had discovered that everything they thought they knew was wrong. May I ask you something? He said. Hanacho nodded. Of course. Why did you hide? Truly? You could have revealed yourselves from the beginning. You could have demanded respect instead of earning it through blood. Hanacho considered the question carefully. Because power without wisdom is just destruction, she said, echoing words that Tae-Jun had spoken months ago. We needed to understand you before you understood us. We needed to see how you treated those you thought were beneath you. We needed to know if you deserved to be saved. Dreth was silent for a long moment. And what did you decide? That you are flawed, Hanacho said honestly. Arrogant. Sometimes cruel. Quick to judge and slow to learn. She paused, then smiled gently. But also capable of growth. Capable of change. Capable of being better. That is why we helped you. Not because you were perfect, but because you had the potential to improve. Dreth closed his glowing eyes. We have much to learn from your kind. Yes, Hanacho agreed. You do, but we have things to learn from you as well. That is what true partnership means. Across the galaxy, the effects of the Battle of Nexus Prime continued to spread. Dr. Yuna Park presented her research to alien scientists on a dozen different worlds. She showed them everything humanity had learned during 50 years of secret observation, not as a weapon or a threat, but as a gift. Her work helped bridge gaps between species that had been enemies for millennia. Lieutenant Minho Kang was offered positions in the military forces of countless species. The Valorans, the Kreeth, the Dorvani, all of them, wanted the human tactical genius who had seen weaknesses they had missed. He declined every offer. I serve Earth, he told each one. That will not change. But I will train anyone who asks. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. Within a year, human military advisors were stationed throughout the assembly. They taught tactics and strategies that focused not on overwhelming force, but on efficiency, adaptability, and precision. They taught that the goal of war was not destruction, but peace. Admiral Seok Hyan remained in command of the human fleet, now permanently stationed in former craft space. He was older and quieter than he had been before the battle, the weight of all those lives resting heavily on his shoulders. But when new threats emerged at the edges of known space, it was his voice that gave the orders. One evening, alone on the observation deck of the Terra's Wrath, he received a transmission from Earth's inner council. The message was brief. Anomalous signals detected beyond the galactic rim. Unknown origin. Possible threat. Seok read the message twice, then looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between galaxies, something was stirring. Something that might make the craft look like children playing with toys. He was not afraid. Fear was something he had learned to set aside long ago. But he was prepared. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. They would face it again. On a distant world, far from the centers of power and war, an alien child sat beside her parent, and watched ships pass overhead. Some of them were human vessels, their distinctive shapes now familiar across the galaxy. "What are humans like?" the child asked. Her parent paused, thinking carefully about how to answer. Once, the answer would have been simple: weak, primitive, insignificant. But the universe had changed. "They are strange," her parent finally said. "They smile and offer friendship. They build hospitals instead of weapons. They help their enemies instead of destroying them. But child, listen to me carefully. Never, ever make them your enemy. Because when humans stop smiling, when they stop offering their hand in peace, when you force them to become something else," the parent shuddered slightly. "There is nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than a human who has been pushed too far." The child looked up at the sky, watching a human ship disappear into the stars. "Will they protect us?" she asked. "Yes," her parents said. "That is the strangest thing of all. They protect everyone, even those who hated them, even those who laughed at them. They protect us not because they must, but because they choose to." The child thought about this for a long moment. "They sound like heroes." Her parents smiled sadly. "Perhaps they are. Or perhaps they are something new, something the galaxy has never seen before." A pause. "I think we are lucky they found us before we found them. I think we are very, very lucky indeed." In the darkness between stars, where no eyes could see, the human fleet kept watch. They did not sleep. They did not rest. They stood guard over a galaxy that had once mocked them, ready to face whatever came next, because that was what humanity did. They protected. They endured. They survived. And somewhere, in the deepest reaches of space, something ancient stirred and began to take notice of the small blue world called Earth and the remarkable creatures who called it home. The story was far from over, but whatever came next, humanity would be ready. They always were.